everyone that matters is a Radiant. Everyone else is either a king or kind of a nobody.
A battle in the sky with
Yeah.
a gigantic flying contraption. They're fighting each other, flying through the air, zooming. This just seems like the coolest cinematic moment that like we've had yet.
I feel like Rhythm of War has less rereadability for me.
Welcome back to Next Chapter. We just read part 1 of the book Rhythm of War.
We have to talk about it.
We are so stoked for it because we are preparing for Wind and Truth. Like and subscribe this video. We are preparing all the way for the launch in December.
It's coming up 4 more weeks, which is why clearly we have to get into Rhythm of War, and we're diving straight in with part 1.
Yeah, so exciting. This book absolutely blew me away the very first time I read it. I was just blown away by the complete scale of this book.
Yeah.
This is the first time I really understood where Sanderson was going with these books. Because in the past books, I remember reading Oathbringer, and maybe it was Rhythm of War. Some moment happened where you told me when you're reading these books for the first time, you're like, oh man, like I don't know if I can do it. Like it's just kind of dumb with the how he's making everyone a Radiant. That's supposed to be Kaladin's thing. He's this like
I
superhero.
remember that conversation.
Yes. And I remember thinking that specifically, and then thinking like, you just wait until you get to Rhythm of War, then you'll realize it's cool. Like,
but it did feel like that, especially going through the first read. One thing that was interesting about this book, and I'll get more to it in a second, I feel like Rhythm of War has less rereadability for me than I expected.
Really?
So I'll get to that in a second, but I agree with the whole, like, if everyone's super, nobody will be. I just watched The Incredibles with my kids. So it's like, it just feels like you're getting too much of this powerful, you're learning so much about Kaladin's powers, and it takes books and thousands of pages to get to more information about Kaladin and what he's doing and how he's learning and how he's training. And then it's like, now you got like 85 Radiants, we're all swearing different ideals, and it's just going... it's scaling up so quickly. You're like, okay, well, now your entire army is going to be Radiant. So it's like, who are you even going to fight against when everyone has Radiant powers? It's like, it's harder for me to follow mass battles where everyone's got all these magical powers. So it's more difficult in that sense.
This book did not start to change your mind to say like, okay, this is where they're going with it. And I think it's actually pretty cool that they've got more than just Kaladin with this.
Not really.
Really?
It's still a hard concept for me because I do feel like it almost makes like, everyone that matters is a Radiant. Everyone else is either a king or kind of a nobody. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, I guess we made that transition. It's just harder because it's not as much of like a relatable struggle and journey and growth.
Yeah.
When so many people are gaining these powers. I don't know.
For me, this book is where it turned the tide for me because I was like, okay, this is freaking awesome. Yeah. You've got a world of superheroes now. Not everyone is super because you have to bond as friend, as you find.
Yes.
But you've got a world of just entire armies of superheroes, which is so cool. You've got the whole dynamics. Like the whole book starts with them basically a battle in the sky with a gigantic flying contraption. They're fighting each other, flying through the air, zooming. This just seems like the coolest cinematic moment that like we've had yet in the Stormlight Archive because everything's just coming together and you're seeing the grandeur of it all. To me, it was thrilling.
I like the elements of Kaladin becoming like a general of Windrunners because he's like directing the forces in a battlefield that's completely new and different. That is pretty cool. Like you have some cool elements of that. I do feel like the reveal of so many more Radiants is still just as difficult for me. I don't know. Maybe by the end of Rhythm of War, I feel a little bit differently. But
there's not flying people in Star Wars. But that gives me such Star Wars vibes because I just imagine an entire battlefield of blue and red flying around and fighting each other in the sky. And like, it's just the blue lightsaber, the red lightsaber type thing is what it feels like. And like it just like feels like a bunch of Jedis around. It's just so cool.
And it gives you that vibe, especially. And this is one thing I want to talk about is the fused. Like it gives you that vibe because they pair off very similar to like a Jedi battle where you're like, cool. We have all these guys, they challenge each other, and then the battle result is just however many of these individual battles were won. Versus we talk a lot about like the carnage of a battle on the ground, where it's like one shard bearer is laying waste to thousands of people. You get a very different vibe. So it almost feels like it's an elevated war machine.
Yep.
It's like you're just doing it at the next level. But I was curious your thoughts on this because the fused seem like they're very honorable I don't know. Like you think about Honor and the Radiance.
Some of them, not all of them.
We do see instances, but the concept that Kaladin is learning that like they tend to one-on-one combat, and there are multiple instances where they will not take an unnecessary advantage because they will respect the honor of like the duel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, how does this connect? And this is some of the thoughts that I had when I first read it as well. How does it connect to like we know about Odium, we know who he is, and we know that Dalinar is trying to get like somehow get a battle, a challenge to like. Let's have two people fight, and that will determine the fate of the world. Instead of, you think about like a brawl in the schoolyard. It was like, these two people are going to fight, but if, your buddy starts to lose, like everyone kind of just gangs in there to make sure he doesn't get beat to a pulp. So you want to avoid that, and it almost feels like it's the same level of honor and respect for that challenge that the Fused have with Odium. So I'm like, that's when the connection starts to build. And you're like, okay, well, how are they similar? How do they work together? And why are they all that stuff? So... And I know we get there in this part, so we get to see a lot of that.
Well, and don't they talk about how they worshipped Honor before the humans did?
Yeah.
And so there's some piece of that left.
But they're trying to convince Odium that they're working for him, so it's like kind of a weird...
Yeah, kind of. Well, and it's interesting because the people brought Odium. So humans brought Odium, and the singers brought in... or
at least Honor was already there, as far as we know,
Or with Honor,
Yeah. It's interesting, but that was one of the things where it's like that the respect, but also they're these like evil entities, but they kind of respect each other.
Yeah, at least their version of the Wind Runners, what do they call them? The Sky. I can't remember if they call them even Sky something, but
because they have different names for things for the Fused.
Each brand is what they call them. But fascinating. It's just Leshwee's group, which is cool. We like Leshwee, but then they also introduce what's cool about these types of Fused being introduced. Is you've had not only the good guys level up, the bad guys level up, right? Which is really cool to make it more interesting. Kaladin's not just going to go in and kick everyone's butt and then like...
Isn't it so curious, though, that happens at the same time? Like, this is the argument we've talked about on podcasts before, if you remember that. But where, like, the Avengers style, where they say, like, our very strength invites opposition.
Right.
Right? Like, when you have a strong, powerful force... the other force is almost backed up against a wall to level up. Yeah. You think about the risks they had to take to level up, the things they had to do to like get to that next level. And we've seen this in previous books, like obviously decimating their society to change everyone into a different form and bring back the Fuse. Like they made those decisions, I feel like, because they recognized that the opposition was getting stronger. And now they're each starting to take more and more risks to level up. Maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's not. But I think it's very similar to that same concept of like the power of the good guys invites a challenge from a powerful bad guy.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. I think that's very cool.
Yeah, we learn a lot from Avengers.
I know, a lot. Yeah, I love that. Also, their weapons are scary, so they're starting to drain the Stormlight out of them.
Yeah, and I feel like they're just the fact that it represents how old they are. So they're just that good.
Yeah,
and Kaladin mentions this. He's like, yeah, okay, they don't have the same skill set. They're not as fast, but they're just so good that they're incredibly difficult to fight.
Yeah. Who do you think has the bigger advantage between the two of them? Like
from a skill set perspective, or like people to people?
Just one-on-one. Like any. So it just. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's interesting because each side has different advantages and disadvantages, right? The Fused are crazy because they've been around so long, but since they've been around and
they're also immortal, that helps.
They get to exactly. They get to take anyone's body and then they get to continue with their skill set. Yep. But then a new Windrunner has to be trained every single time somebody dies.
But I think they're slightly more powerful.
But yes, but they're more powerful.
But they can't take as many risks because they're not just going to be reborn.
Yes.
So I do think expert to expert Windrunners have the edge.
You think so?
Yes.
I think still feel like
the Fused are immortal, that makes up the difference.
It is true. And
but skill set, raw skill set,
Windrunners
should be able to win. And you have to take into account, we have expert Fused because they've been around for so long. We don't yet have an expert Windrunner. Kaladin's great. He's not he's not the best. He's not like all the ideals.
He's good enough to beat Leshwee.
He is. No, he's fantastic. Yeah. That's why I'm saying if he was to get to like the raw full power level, like we've even heard that like you get your armor if you go up a certain level.
Right.
Right. He could be better for sure. Like he could have armor. He could have all these things that would significantly improve his odds in these battles. I think that a raw skill expert Windrunner is going to beat a raw skill expert Fused.
All right. But then we'll probably have to get into this later, but does a fused get their own armor at another level too? Or their carapace kind of works as armor too?
I think their carapace kind of works as armor because you think about it, they don't have the same stuff. They don't have the shard blades or the shard weapons or they don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
So like they have those limitations. I don't think they would get
Yeah.
real armor either.
Yeah. It's crazy. So their battle, so he lets one of the fused live, and then one of the fused lets the Windrunners live after that.
We might have lost Zigzil otherwise.
Yeah, that would have been nuts. But I feel like that is such a bigger deal to the Windrunners than it would be to any of the
100%. Yes.
And which is crazy to me. Do you agree with Dalinar, who says you shouldn't be allowing that to happen because then I can't trust you to like actually kill when you need to on a battlefield?
I think he's wrong.
Yeah.
I think he's absolutely wrong. I think Kaladin is playing the odds here and he needs to because that's their best chance.
Yeah.
Like the risk that they take in being brutal and receiving brutality back is way too high.
Yeah,
like
I agree.
Honestly,
I agree.
even if they had killed Zigzil and been like, oh, like I don't care about your offer here, we're still gonna go and be brutal. The risk would have been worth it still to let them go because you don't gain hardly anything from killing them.
Yeah,
and you could lose a whole lot if they start killing you without.
It's just all the
honor.
train. How long does it take to train a new Windrunner from ground
Years.
zero? Yeah,
like it's a
that's
long
what I'm saying.
time.
Like the fused have such a huge advantage, and so fighting in that way, it almost is like you get another life going to like just like the fused go to another body. Like it's like another
Zigzil
Reaper.
can heal, especially with an edge dancer. I think he got the better end of that deal by a huge margin.
Yeah,
and
very
Dalinar's wrong.
very fascinating.
But Dalinar's also that's his whole life has been war, and he doesn't understand this new war as well.
Yeah,
so
fascinating. I do love that opening battle, and then they have all of a sudden introduced new technology. This is the first time in a book, by the way, that we've had a time jump. The first book, second book, and third book are all back to back to back.
Yeah.
Right? The third book, happens right after he kills Sadeas. Or the second book third book takes place right after he kills Sadeas, which is back to back. They just found Urithiru. Yeah. So I think this is the first one that there's
where they built this entire
is a year
machine.
later since book 3 ended, and they build this huge flying platform.
I love that they call it the fourth bridge.
That's cool. Yeah. Love that. It's just so cool how he just levels up the technology in the books as they go.
I think so. Let me harken back to right at the beginning of the episode. I mentioned this is a little harder of a reread for me. And as everyone on this channel should know, we're casual fans, so we don't have all the expert advice, but this is where we have those discussions. So if you find anything, comment below and let us know if we missed something. But the reason it was that way for me, I think, is because I'm seeing a lot more like introductions to things and less reveals. I don't know. That's how it is in my head. I'm introduced to a lot of new stuff, but nothing's like a major reveal. So it's more like you get a lot of benefit as you read, but it's not like a eagerness for the next big reveal.
Let me reframe this for you,
please.
okay?
Yes.
This is less of a this is more of an answers book. This is a book that just says, hey, we built up a lot of questions over these past few books.
Yeah.
We're going to start giving you answers. That's how this book feels to me.
It's like logical answers, though. It's not, it's more like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. Like they're explaining a lot about how fabrials work. They're explaining a lot about like how we built this and how this works and how all those physics are a little bit different. It's cool to learn and you feel like you're gaining that knowledge about the world and you're starting to understand more about the complexities of it. I just feel like it's harder of a reread in that sense because they already know those things. So the learning isn't as like emotionally exciting to me because I already know it. Whereas reveals, even in a reread, you're like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Like getting to those moments in Words of Radiance, you're like, I love it. I love that moment and I'm going to appreciate it every time.
Yeah, it's true.
But learning events like this, I feel like aren't as powerful on a reread.
I see what you mean. I
got there in the end.
For me, I love this book is very science heavy.
Yes.
And I, for some reason, love that. I
like the science. What was the book we talked about? Three Body Problem. We love the physics and science books. Yeah.
Yeah. And then even Mistborn Era 2 goes very deep into the science. It feels very similar to this book, by the way.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in certain parts that we get into later, but there are parts that I'm like, wow, like they're just experimenting, straight up experimenting. And that's book 4, like the last book, The Lost Metal, when he's doing all the experiments.
Yep.
But anyways, I love all of that. To me, it's giving answers. At the beginning of every single chapter, they're talking about how the different fabrials work, and you're getting really excited because they're talking about different metals that you use. Like if you use pewter and everything, and then you're thinking
I feel like we need to do a Navani Steris crossover episode.
That's true. But then I'm thinking pewter, it's like, how is this related to Scadrial and the Mistborn world, and why does it affect the fabrials in this way? And like, it's just fascinating.
It is
They're
very
bringing
interesting.
so many things together with that.
It almost, so we're jumping a little bit, still in part 1, but jumping to the talk about like the Ghost Bloods and talking about like why they're there and what they're trying to accomplish and like trying to remove Stormlight, like move Stormlight.
Oh yeah. Well, I was just talking about like the
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying the interim where like, yeah, metals interact with different Stormlight things. Like you almost feel like the Ghost Bloods are trying to learn even more about that. Like, okay, well, if we can get Stormlight over there or over there, over there, just take it off world. Maybe we can do even greater things.
Oh yeah, you're talking about the whole part with Mraize.
Yes.
I'm talking about like the little like intro like parts that Navani's giving a speech to like everyone.
Yeah, so we're learning about how metals interact with the fabrials. We're learning that, and I'm thinking that's probably a big reason why the Ghost Bloods want to take this Stormlight, because of how it interacts with other Cosmere magic systems.
Yeah, well, and they also say that it's the only way. It's this world gives
the rawest power,
the most power for free, which is interesting because we had this conversation when we read Warbreaker.
Yes, that was a big conversation.
Yeah, because we're like, we won't go into any spoilers, but the way that you get power there is so much more costly than it is in Roshar. And I was like, is that even fair? Like, it feels like Roshar is overpowered. And the answer is yes, it is overpowered.
But no one's figured out how to get it off world, which is what the Ghost Bloods want to do.
And they also love that you can just transport it in spheres
safely,
and you can just get it around so easily.
You can transport raw power. It's
raw investiture.
Investiture. But you also get like a similar thing what they're trying to do in Mistborn. You know, like we're just talking magic systems. There's obviously not any spoilers in this. But it's like magic system in Mistborn where like metal is the magic. Mm-hmm. Like you can transport that, but is it as powerful as a Stormlight you can also transport? So yeah, you start to think about, you know, there's going to be some really good panels about magic systems in Dragonsteel, so that'll be fun. Maybe we'll learn a couple of things about that. But I think it is cool to learn all those things. I just think the reveal is a little bit less exciting because I've already learned those things.
I don't know. For me, like, even though I read it last time.
How long ago did you read it last? Maybe that's a good question to ask.
No, I read it right when it came out, like 3 years ago.
Okay, because my read was probably about a year ago, just over a year ago.
Really? It was that long?
It was shortly before we started the podcast when I read it.
Really? Well, that's crazy. Maybe that's why. For me, like,
that might be part of it, honestly.
Even then, though, like, I still am jumping back because I feel like I'm not catching like everything with all the science. Like, I'm constantly skipping back in this. Like,
nice.
Just like, okay, like, what did they say there? Like, that's crazy how it interacts, and like, how are they doing the pulley systems and like.
And everyone gives us, not everyone, a lot of you give us grief for reading an audiobook. But Marty read a good portion of this part 1 in a physical book, which is why his book is no longer on the shelf, because it's at home, because he's reading it like a real reader.
Forgot to bring it back. I actually was not reading a good portion of it. That would not be true. Like
a portion of it.
Yes, every single book that I get, I listen to, but then I try to read portions of it as well. I like reading through it and stuff. So I did read chapters out of this book.
I'm saying that's redemption for us, so people can stop saying that we're
I wouldn't even say that
readers.
It's not a redemption. You guys are crazy. That's what happens.
We do get a lot of grief for that. I still think it's
how else are you going to say, like, I listened to that book? Like, sure, you could say that over and over again.
I don't like it. No.
Like, that's what you do. You read books. It doesn't matter if somebody else read the book to you. You read it, okay? Like, that's the term.
It's a good point. Did Dalinar ever read Way of Kings? Come on.
Yeah, never read it, actually. He listened to it. Probably read it.
That's hilarious,
now,
actually.
Because he's
okay.
Not to read,
that's fair. But the first time, also, you know what's shocking is we've gotten this far and we had not talked about the intro to the book, which is what we've done for every single one of our books to this point. But Rhythm of War, we forgot. Now, this is every book so far, the first 4, have been different recounts of the beginning of the entire Way of Kings, where the assassination of Gavilar happens. Mm-hmm. And that's a big deal because now we see it from Navani's perspective. And I think this is the most emotional version of that. If I think back, yes. I think it's the most emotional one because it's like Navani is having all the, you know that Navani now loves Dalinar, but you learn that like those feelings already existed. She married Gavilar and they have this like really difficult relationship emotionally, and there's just
This is when
not a lot of love there.
This is when you realize that Gavilar is actually the worst.
He's not great.
Yeah.
He's not really making a good case for himself.
Not a good dude. Navani does say like there are good times and bad times and everything. This is very clearly a bad time. And it sounds like he's become this way more and more over the years.
I think it's because she talks about how he's always late to stuff. He's always distracted. He's found this like massive mission. Obsession is a great word for it. And that's totally taken. Like he doesn't have time for anyone. He doesn't really care about big, like this huge thing that's happening, this big party. He's like, it doesn't really matter because I'm planning on becoming a god or whatever he says.
Yeah,
like,
he says that.
I'm becoming immortal, so this doesn't matter anyway. He's basically, you almost feel like he's like the Sunmaker basically, but he thinks he's even better. Mm-hmm. Where they're like, he just cannot stop at the conquest. And he's like, I've discovered this power and I'm going to be the greatest thing ever and nothing else matters. So like that obsession is clearly bad. But he seems to think that it's the best way forward. So Navani has this whole conversation, and he's incredibly, incredibly mean. And so it's just crazy. I feel like this is the most emotional way to hear that story.
Oh, yeah. Very emotional. And you find out there are just more and more secrets to be had.
Yeah, it's almost like you find out more and realize you know less.
Oh, yeah. There's something else going on here.
Yeah, exactly. You still don't know. Even through this part 1, you learn a little bit more about like Zeth retrieves like the void light. What do we call it? What do you call the
void light sphere?
The sphere, yeah.
Yeah.
So the sphere of void light, you like he grabs it and he has it and they're studying it, but you're like, we still know nothing. It's almost like that knowledge just completely died with Gavilar, and now we have to relearn it all.
Yeah, crazy. And I wonder, but I always wonder too, because he's wanting to like say the words and things like that. But can someone like that really say the words and bond a Spren?
I think it depends a lot on the Spren. Because think about
I do agree with this.
Think about all the tests they've been doing. Like all these Fabrials are Spren captured. You're like, that's brutal. But I got to assume that the Spren world is just as diverse of opinion, thought, and motives as the human one.
There do seem to be some pretty sketchy Spren out there.
Exactly.
Yep.
About the Spren stuff, one of the questions that I had was like Kaladin with, what was the Spren's name that was going to bond with R'lain?
Oh.
It was like Fanfen or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it is.
I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was Ja Not that was sending it. It is one of the Unmade was sending the corrupt Spren.
No, not the corrupt Spren.
Oh, you're talking
the one Kaladin was talking to, the Honor Spren. Maybe it's a small part. But basically, Kaladin says you have to try and bond.
You're right,
because
I got confused.
It's a weird name.
She's sending that Spren to bond with Mraize.
Yes.
That's what.
Yes. To infiltrate.
When you were saying
Ghost
funky names, that's why I was thinking
yeah,
that. But
I'm throwing out all kinds of names, going different. But the reason I talk about the Spren is I thought it was interesting because Kaladin's basically commanding the Honor Spren, and I'm like, that's got to be wild.
Yep.
For them, because the Honor Spren are very like, we met them a little bit in lasting integrity. Like they don't mess around, and the fact that he's like, you got to do this, try and bond him for 10 days or something similar. I just thought I was like, whoa, back off a little bit, Kaladin. Like,
I don't.
What happened to like the respect for Syl and her?
Well, it's because Syl told him like you could do it, and he's like, okay, I'll try it.
I just feel like he's pushing against his own character there, and I didn't like it.
You really?
I didn't like it.
Like, I thought it was funny, but I also thought it was like, well, he's just being military right now. He's like, oh yeah,
that's fair. I can see that angle for sure.
Yeah, so that I was fine with it, but then. Did you have anything else with Navani? The other interesting thing was the Herdazian general that you started getting. He is hilarious. Like, I really enjoy his character. And it seems like anybody who comes out of Herdaz now, because we've got Lopin and the general, they're all just characters, man. Yeah. Well, we saw him in one of the interludes in the earlier books. They didn't mention
You always do that to me, and I'm like, how do you remember all these? I read the interludes, and they go in one ear and out the other most of the time.
I didn't catch this until our reread of Oathbringer, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the Herdazian general. And so they have a guy who's imprisoned, and they're saying, what punishment do you want? You can have this punishment, or you can be with the hog. Like, the hog? Like, I'll choose the hog for sure. He's like, was that
okay. Evil sea monster?
Yeah, it turns out it's not, but they're chained up, and he's like, there's only one person who I've ever known who's escaped it, and he's like, right, and I was the only one or something like that, and it was clearly the Herdazian general.
Oh man,
because he escapes everything.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, it was just hilarious to realize that was the same guy, having like read Rhythm of War before I was able to catch it in Oathbringer. And so it made 100% sense with how they're being so funny about like you can pick the hog, or like we can hang you from like whatever. And
yeah, it was terrible options.
Yes. Or like you can do this one thing and it just happens to be the general that escapes everything, is able to escape the hog as well for some reason. But anyways, kind of really fun.
You say for some reason, but maybe there's more to that story. Maybe he's secretly got some powers of escapism.
Maybe the guy is able to like do all sorts of crazy stuff. So what did he make himself into like a dummy of towels or something like that? And
in the barrack or whatever they were doing, he just like, oh, he's gone again.
Yeah, dang it. He's like, dang it.
All the bodyguards are like, ugh, hate it when that happens.
He's like escaped from Yasna or Dalinar. No, he's hanging out with Shallan and Adolin or something like that.
Yeah.
And he keeps disappearing while they're showing him around the tower. He's like, he did that like 2 or 3 times and it was kind of getting annoyed. Like
it's funny. It's almost like part of his character. But he's a good one, and it's fun to see that he's like getting involved really quickly. Yeah. Especially when they like show him the map and the plan. He's like, well, you got to think about this. Like, he's a general and he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, because he's also brilliant. Like he knows how to survive. That's why he's always running, right? He's will never get caught, and that's why the fused couldn't
do anything.
Couldn't stop him. Yep. And they're like, you held him off forever, and we thought you were dead every time. So that's why they like him a lot. Yeah, I thought he was great. He was great.
Speaking of favorite characters, Zyle, I do that a lot.
Yeah,
with Kaladin.
Did you catch a
great.
lot more Easter eggs there?
Way more this time. I'm like, dude, he's got him. He has no chance. It's like he's got the laundry. That's all he needs.
I know.
Like, I think that is pretty hilarious. And so this is one of the things that I think is cool to have already read Warbreaker, and it just makes that scene so much more fun. And the first time I read this, so I didn't read Warbreaker till this podcast started, so I already read all 4 of these books and had caught none of this. Even though I will say the references aren't quite as clear as I would have thought they would have been, especially in the first books. You're like, I see what he's saying and I get the connection, but it's like, that's not something that was really explained in Warbreaker, so you don't really get all of it. But then this scene in particular, you're like, that's cool. Because you've seen Zyle, you've seen him before, but you're also like, he's just toying with it. Like he has no chance. Even then he has all these powers and all these skill sets, like Zyle's gonna win that battle.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool. You have a different frame of reference for it.
He's fighting with the towels wrapped around his arms and everything. And
you see him fight in that exact same way in Warbreaker. It's just cool.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, the whole Zyle thing is really neat. And that leads to Kaladin. Some conversations with them. So Kaladin is there in the first place because he's trying to decide if he wants to become an Ardent, because he was let go in war. Because because he had another freeze in battle when he met Moash. On a scale from 1 to 1,000,000, how much do you hate Moash?
It's crazy how you just feel like he completely 180'd from like this guy in Bridge 4, and now he's just like brutal murderer all the time.
Yeah, the guy is awful.
It's pretty terrible.
He is awful. He's trying to get Kaladin to kill himself, while he's talking to him.
Doesn't make any sense, and it's hard. It's hard to watch.
He's evil,
especially because Kaladin's in such a terrible place right now.
Yeah, I remember getting to this part of the book, and this is again, you're gonna find this theme. I really love Rhythm of War. I think it's a great book. But the whole mental battle that Kaladin has to go through, and dealing with coming out of the depression. But not only that, but having someone who's encouraging the depression on top of that is intense and crazy.
You feel it.
And that's why so many people are justified in just absolutely hating Moash. But Moash is just such a good anti-Kaladin. And he straight up says it in one of the parts too. He's like I can't remember. Oh, it's when Renarin comes in and he sees another version of himself. Moash does. Yeah. And where he sees he's bonded to Spren, he looks radiant and everything. Yeah. And you see that his path, he could have been the Kaladin path, but he took the Moash path instead.
Crazy. Yeah. And they talk about, is there a redemption arc for Moash? I don't know. Maybe. We have a lot to read.
I know.
But I think that's one of the conversations they're planning on having at
Dragonsteel. I'm like, I don't know.
You don't think so?
Yeah, he's pretty gone, but we'll see. Yeah. Other things. So we see Leshwi and Venli interact.
Yes.
And it is crazy. So this is the book too where I feel like Kate Redding really starts standing out for me. The other books, she's fine. Her voice for Leshwi is awesome. I love her voice of all of the different fused and people and everything. It's just really, really good.
Yeah, so it really keeps you in that character, which is so hard for an audiobook reader.
Yeah,
but they do such a good job.
She makes Leshwi sound like ancient, but like powerful at the same time. I was just blown away. Big fan.
It's impressive.
This is where Kate Redding is getting some big praise from me. We've given Michael Kramer a lot. Kate Redding nailed it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I had to throw that in there. What do we think about Venli?
I think overall for me, the fused and the Venli and the Leshwi and like all of those scenes are just feel longer. I don't know why. It's just I just feel like it drags on a little bit more.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because I don't know those characters as well.
Yeah. Talk with me about the scene where they're meeting with the Nine.
The Nine?
Yeah.
So that I thought was I love the pursuer. It's just the funniest like guy to me. He's like just can't get over this one thing. He's like, I have to do this.
That's
it has
my
to be
thing.
my thing. That's all I do. I capture the guy that killed me. It's my job.
Yep.
And then Leshwi like gets around, talks him out of it, like talks the Nine out of letting him do that.
Yep.
Which is also, I wonder if it's more of a preservation tactic for Kaladin too, because she knows the pursuer's only goal is going to be to kill Kaladin.
Yeah.
But I feel like Leshwi respects him, like respects what he's doing, and also feels like there's a little bit more of a substance to Kaladin. It's like not just an enemy, but more like, I don't know, a respected opposing general. I don't know. Maybe that's a bad comparison, but it feels like Leshwi is more caring of Kaladin, which is why she's trying to do this intentionally to protect him. But I also love the scene where Kaladin just beats them all up even without his Stormlight. They're like, he has no Stormlight. And then Kaladin's like, I just, we'll be fine.
He's like, your stupid machine didn't work because he still had his powers. There's no other way he could have killed me. And then Leshwi's like, he for sure killed you without his powers. You just got owned by Kaladin.
It's hilarious. I just think that's a great scene for sure.
Yeah, that was a very
It's fun
cool
to
scene.
Listen to. Like that type of a moment. You're like, got him.
Also brings me to those moments where Sanderson is starting to get us set up for those perilous moments where like, he lost his Stormlight. He's screwed.
Yeah, well, you start to rely on it more and more, especially living in a tower that's like way above the world. So it's a little intimidating, but
yeah, it's just crazy. Yeah, because this is the part when he went into the town and then loses his power.
Oh, this is the yes, and then they make a connection. I can't remember if it's right after or a little bit later, but Navani makes a connection between that and the tower. Oh, what's it called? The tower jewels, whatever, like that.
Oh,
she's like, oh, these are very similar, and I'm like. This is where I'm like, wait, what? They have a big power canceling device in the middle of the tower? Sounds like a horrible idea.
Well, that's what Rabonio? Rabonio, is that how you say her name? This is the chapter that I read. I read the chapter of the Nine.
If you're reading it to be like, how in the world? Like, I would never get ELA correct if I was reading it instead of listening to it. I'd be like, I don't know.
It's the crazy fuse that wanted to make a virus to kill like everyone in the.
Yes.
But anyway, she is the one who talks about like we could make the device in Urithiru to cancel out the powers of all of the.
But I'm like, that's terrifying.
And then Navani, you're saying, realizes this too.
She makes the connection because the devices are similarly built or something like that, or like the similar structure, metals or whatever. And I'm like, man, like that they got to get on that because that seems like a really big deal.
Oh yeah,
and I remember that was my first reread. That was quite the reveal for me.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, it's again a book of answers.
That's true. I'm seeing it more and more as we go through these.
Yeah, you'll notice it more, especially as we go on. They keep on answering questions that we didn't know before, like the Stormfather starting to answer stuff, Silfrena starting to ask questions that and get answers and give answers and things, and talking about her old Radiance. It's like, yeah, we used to be at this city before, and all these things that Sanderson wasn't giving us before. He's just giving us lots more this time, which is nice. I like that. Any other notable things we want to talk about from part one?
I think when we talk notable, we should probably start making our list. Yeah.
Besides, the last thing I want to talk about is Taravangian.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough.
It's a big moment in Taravangian. Yeah. So Taravangian at this moment, they all decide that they're going to use Taravangian to let the fuse get into Urithiru. And again, this is a brilliant writing tactic of Sanderson to put the whole meeting of saying we're going to break into Urithiru and we're going to do all these things. So now you've got the ticking clock in your mind. You're thinking like, oh my gosh, they're going to come at any like minute. You just don't know when they're coming.
Yeah.
And it puts in that underlying intensity in the story. So even moments that like you're just learning about science and things like that from Navani, still intense because you've got the ticking time bomb of them coming in. They call them singers, right? The listeners were the old. There's a difference between the two. Have you caught that? They call them singers for the new ones and then listeners for the old ones. Or do I have that flipped? I think it's singers is the.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Anyways.
They'll tell us in the comments, right?
They will. They will. So anyways, but Taravangian, we start seeing in that interlude where he is ready to sacrifice himself to betray Dalinar so that he can do Odium's bidding and save his own
crazy.
city.
His whole storyline is so wild to me because he's so committed to this, I guess, guise that he's under for Odium and for protecting what he feels like is important, that just nothing else matters. He's like so convinced himself of this over time that it's just like he just skates through just betraying everybody. It just kills me.
Oh yeah, the guy is like, he even calls himself evil. I'm like, I know it's evil. Like,
he's just okay with that. Like, he must have just like his negative self-affirmations he must be doing every single day to become this apathetic person. It's crazy.
He's the ends justify the means.
That is his whole persona.
Yes, it is though, like in every way. But what is cool about Sanderson's writing technique is he does a very, very good way at creating characters that you see it from their perspective. Yeah. Like you almost feel bad for him and his company when you're in the interlude.
Because you feel more of his emotions.
Yeah, everyone's crying and they're like, man, like we had such a good relationship. He's talking to his wife like for 74 years. How wonderful is it to have a best friend for that long? I'm like, what a cool comment, by the way. It made me think about my own marriage. I'm like, oh, that's so
from an
funny.
Evil person, though.
Yes, but he shows like a human side to evil people, which makes it just so much more complicated and a better story. Because evil people they are evil, right? They're all evil, but like you can humanize them to show them like what their motives are and reasonings for doing these things. That makes you see, I could see why they went down that path, even though it was the absolute wrong path and thing to do.
But their motives make sense, and they're not just a shell of an evil character.
Yes.
I think that's important. Yeah.
It's not a Lord of the Rings take, where you've got Sauron, who is just evil, and that's all he is. Like,
he's just evil. You just expect him to be evil.
Yep.
Bad.
Which there's a place for both kind of stories, but I love the complex evil character. I think it's
I think it makes more
favorite.
sense, and it's more fun to read.
Yep. We love our Avengers connections. That's why we love Thanos, right?
Everybody. Yep.
Yeah.
It's a big one.
Yeah, it's a big one. Cool. But yes, let's go into. We're gonna do top 3 moments because this is part 1.
If you're new to this channel, you haven't seen our other episodes. For all the others, we do lists of the best moments of each book, starting from part 1, and we'll continue adding and moving things around through all 4 parts, so don't miss those. And subscribe, obviously, if you haven't already. But let's go through the top 3. I will submit 2 of them.
Okay, let's hear it.
One is Kaladin fighting without Stormlight. I think it's a cool scene. I really like it. And the other one is Kaladin and Xyle.
Okay.
And his like moment of almost joining the Ardentia.
And I don't know how to spell Xyle.
Zahel. I looked this up.
Z-A what?
H-E-L.
Oh, love it. Okay.
That's what I get for listening to the audiobook, I guess.
Yeah. For me, the moment when he's fighting Moash and he comes in and sees Moash, to me is such a huge moment.
The Moash reveal
that he's there, and then him being saved by the assassin in white as well as Renarin was pretty amazing to me.
Yeah. So Moash's entrance to Rhythm of War.
Moash versus Kaladin, round 1.
Round 1. Nice.
Yeah, this is actually round 2 because he broke down the first time he saw him too when he killed.
He froze.
when he killed, we already forgot his name, the old king.
Elhokar.
Yeah,
Yep.
he didn't do anything anyways. That's why he's forgettable king, right?
Oh, ouch.
Yeah.
No, it was really hard to remember the difference between Elhokar and Gavilar. I don't know why that's so difficult.
Yeah,
for
they're
me.
close. They're close names.
They're not even that. I don't feel like they're that close. I just maybe the
I think they rhyme.
yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah.
The pacing of the word, maybe. Anyway, anything else you want to add before we turn them into an actual list? I think maybe the reveal of the fourth bridge is kind of cool because you're like, wow, that's like wild.
I
They're
know. That's
building
what I
these
want to say.
massive
Like, how do
fabrials.
you like frame that?
Just say the fourth bridge?
Yeah.
We can do whatever we want on this show.
I know. It's great. Fourth bridge. Okay. I think those are top 4. We'll have to decide on the 3. Yeah. So I think you're number 1. I kind of think the Moash and Kaladin one is number 1.
I can see it. I think that has more complexity to that fight, even though I really like the Kaladin without Stormlight.
Yeah. Kaladin without Stormlight's pretty cool. I think the fourth bridge though is pretty amazing as well.
We can do fourth bridge number 2.
I kind of would rather have the Kaladin and Xyle or the fighting without Stormlight. Hard decision, right?
That is very hard because fighting without Stormlight, I feel like is more cinematically awesome.
Yeah.
But for the plot and like the character development, Xyle is probably better.
We didn't even talk about Shallan and her whole moment with going to kill Iole.
Yeah, that's pretty big.
That's amazing. That whole moment was crazy.
Yeah. Well, I love the part where she's like, "Did we kill her?"
Yeah. Like, was that us?
Was that us?
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. Let's finish up the top 5, and we got to talk about.
Well, do you want to throw it into the top 5?
I know. I think that whole moment when she's meeting, like, what do you think the part when she meets Iole after like the ravines?
I think the part when Iole is
or when
like,
she gets killed.
she's killed is way bigger.
Yeah,
for sure.
Bigger or
bigger.
But what's
Yeah.
cooler?
Like, it's also cooler.
Yeah, we're going. Okay, sounds good.
Iole Sadius is murdered, assassinated.
Assassination. Wow, this is gonna go bad now. I'm just gonna keep typing. Okay, how do you spell Iole?
Assassinated.
Yeah, I know. This is what happens when I'm just typing on camera.
Iole? Oh, I do know. Again, because it's so difficult to pronounce. Ialia.
Ialia.
Yes, Iole.
Wow.
Right? Because this is one where I was like, I have to know how you spell that. Like, is it with an E?
Okay.
No, it's wildly confusing, especially because it's always capitalized. The first I looks like an L, so it looks like la-la-e.
Yeah, you're right.
But it's not.
It's not. Were you reading it this time?
No, the first time I read a lot of it, though.
Okay, cool.
And that's where I was like, la-la-e. Yeah.
There you go. Is this a good top 3?
Which one did you end with? The assassination?
Yeah.
So you're saying both of my scenes are not good enough for you?
You put in the fourth bridge.
I guess that's true.
Yeah.
But the other two are so close.
I know.
I'm going to say give Kaladin and Xyle, bump it up so it can be honorable mention number 1. That's all I will change. And you can keep your 3.
Okay. We'll put it like this. Okay, so number 1 is Moash versus Kaladin, round 1.
Yep.
Number 2 is the fourth bridge appearance.
Yep.
And then number 3 is the assassination of Iole.
Pretty good stuff.
Yep.
There's some cool moments in this, but I feel like that's if we missed anything, I'm sure you guys will let us know, which we appreciate.
Wait, we need to talk about Shallan's moments. I want to talk about this for a minute.
Do it. Let's do it.
This is a big deal because this is also a part that I was bugged from Oathbringer. Okay. So I, for some reason, was under the impression that Shallan had like solved things, like figured things out in Oathbringer. Then you get into... And now on the reread, it didn't feel like that as much.
Sure.
Because I knew what was going on happening next. But in this book, you get to the point, and she's full on 3 separate personalities, not even close to
she's having actual conflict between her own personalities.
They are full on people at this point.
Yeah, it's confusing.
Yeah. What do you feel like? What do you think about her whole situation?
This is where, and I have to go back to my first read to get my reactions to it. And I think I was... basically, this is going to either turn into... first, I was wondering, is this just an inherent issue with her Order of Radiance? Mm-hmm. Like, maybe all of the Lightweavers are just kind of messed up?
Yeah,
they have issues? I don't know. Because of how they create illusions and lies and bond with cryptics. Maybe that's a thing. And the other was this is either going to end with, just some massive, explosion, or somehow she's going to create actual alternate identities that like live their own lives.
Yeah.
That's where I really thought it was going.
No, I know. I just can't decide if I liked it or not. Like I'm like
It's hard,
it kind of
yeah.
bothered me. I'm just like I don't know. Like if this, I mean, I get it.
It's a very complicated, emotional, traumatic issue that she's dealing with, so I can understand why it's like difficult to read.
Yeah. I don't know. I just couldn't decide if I was buying it. I'm like,
Is it
this
overblown? You're saying, like a little bit too much?
Yeah, I'm just like,
I can see that.
I don't know, because she's full on just like, well, let's see. Like this is like way different from book 3, okay? Because she's having full on moments in the tavern with Adolin, where when she becomes Vale, she's not as lovey with Adolin anymore.
No,
and
they're
then,
bros.
yeah, they're bros, which is so weird. But then all of a sudden she becomes Shallan, and they're lovey again and everything, and they're doing the multiple personality disorder thing, which like I understand is a thing. But I don't know. For some reason, I just wasn't buying it, like, with it, the first
And then
read.
even more so in Rhythm of War.
Yeah.
They're, like, having conversations with each other a little bit more.
Oh, no, that's what I'm saying. In Rhythm of War is, like, where that started. It was in the tavern. It just blew me away. I'm like, wow. Like, and you're right. They are having conversations between themselves now.
Yeah.
Like, which is crazy.
But you have to imagine that that's what happens with, like, a split personality. Like, they have to be almost completely separate from each other. I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
Other than in movies.
I
know it's a real thing.
I know it.
Look, my only experience in those movies, so I don't know if it kind of taints my actual understanding.
This is the one thing, though, that I will say Sanderson is so good at. He is so good at putting you in the shoes of somebody who's experiencing something completely different than you are.
Yeah.
Than you have. He puts you in the experience of Kaladin experiencing extreme depression. Shallan, you've got the multiple personalities. He's done it with
childhood trauma.
Childhood trauma. Like you've got like lots of other people he does this with too. But it really starts to give you a different perspective on like
Dalinar is a big one too.
Yeah, like how to deal with that, like how to help other people in those situations.
And how sometimes they don't deal with it. Like I like that the answer isn't always like, oh, and then they like, stood up straighter and solved the problem. Like he's not depressed anymore. But like, no, he's dealing with it and it's really hard. It's kind of ruining his life.
Yes. I remember the first time I read this book, and then at this time again, I remember thinking I need to take notes as I'm reading through this book on how to help someone through depression, because Sanderson clearly has experience doing this the way that he's writing it. Like he knows like what to tell people with depression. You don't tell them just like, God, bucko, just be happier. Like
you'll be fine.
Yeah, you'll be fine. He says like,
just smile more.
You just encourage them and you hang out with them. Don't let them be alone when they're in the darkest, even though they say they want to be alone. You don't let them be alone, which I thought was kind of cool. And so I'm excited as we get further into the book to find out what else we can
resolved,
do.
if it gets resolved.
Yeah, I just love learning about that. So it's awesome.
That is awesome.
Anyways, I think that's the last thing I had to say. But
it's good. It's good to make sure we talk about this thing. Like Shallan, I feel like is often relegated to the end of our conversations on the podcast. So hey, there you go. But I think this is a fun one, and we're just barely scratching the surface of Rhythm of War. So there's a lot to come. Obviously, 3 more parts of this, and we will commit to finishing this 4-part series before Dragonsteel Nexus 2024, which we will be at. So if you're going to be there, we are excited to meet you, see you, interact, and make sure you come to our panels. But with that, we'll sign off. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you haven't already, and we will see you in the next chapter.